Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joe Carey, owner of Decumanis Design Build, and we're a residential construction company specializing in net zero capable houses. For those of you that don't know what that means, a net zero house is a house that over a year's time produces as much energy mostly through solar photovoltaics as it uses in a year. So at night, in the winter, short days, that house is going to be pulling electricity off the grid, but in the middle of July during the day, it's going to be putting electricity back into the grid. At the end of the year, those two things balance out and you have a net zero house. So that's the goal for all the houses we build. We do that through using high quality windows with a low U value and a very well insulated wall cavities that are both well insulated but also well sealed up so air doesn't leak in and out. What I want to do today is explain a little bit about the different wall assemblies we use and why we use them, and then also explain this test I'm setting up. So this space we're in right now is a garage that I'm building on my property. I use it for tools and construction materials, but also to work on some old cars I like to work on. So I started this project about 6 months ago. It's all framed up. We're getting to the point of insulation. And I thought, since we're building this, I'm going to take the opportunity to test different wall assemblies that we at Decumanis Green use when we're building these net zero homes. One of the difficulties with thickly insulated walls is that you can run into moisture problems. There's a ton of information out there about why that's true and how that's true. I'm not going to go into that a lot today. Enough to say that when you have very thick, well-insulated walls, there's always the danger that condensation is going to happen on the sheathing of the wall. So back here on the outside of the insulation up against the cold outdoors. There's a number of different ways to manage that and make sure either it doesn't happen in the first place, best case scenario, but also almost an impossible scenario to create because you're always going to have a little bit of air leakage into those cavities. That air is going to have a little bit of moisture in it. It's warm and it enters the wall cavity. As it travels through the wall cavity to the outside wall, it's going to cool down. There's the chance of condensation. So that's always going to happen to some degree, and it's about how you manage that process. Can you allow a little bit of moisture to accumulate on the back sheathing of the wall and dry it out over time and dry it out? So you go through this cycle of getting wet and drying out, and as long as those two balance out, so there's no accumulation, sorry for that grammar, over time, the walls function fine. And that's been shown time and time again, that walls can get wet as long as they're given sufficient opportunity to dry out. So what I've got here are 3 different wall assemblies. The very first bay you see there is a double stud wall. That's something that we build a lot of. It's kind of our go-to assembly. A lot has been written on why it's a good idea to do it. So that's wall number 1. The second wall has this Intello product on it. That's a slightly different assembly. It's a single stud with a layer of insulation on that stud, and then another smaller, thinner stud on the outside of that will hold the sheetrock. That Intello product is what they call a smart barrier. It doesn't allow, theoretically, it does not allow moisture into the cavity, but once some moisture gets in there, because as I said before, it always gets in there, it actually lets it out. So it changes its permeability under different conditions to prevent moisture from getting in, but once it's in, letting it keeping it from getting trapped in there. So that was a big problem back in the early 70s when we were facing our first oil crunch, and builders were going crazy to try to make homes, super energy efficient. One of the things they did was put, plastic, wrapping it around the outside, wrapping it around the inside. They tried everything. Very often, what happened was the moisture inside the cavities that inevitably got there never had the opportunity to dry out. It was trapped behind the polyethylene, which is a very good vapor barrier. Very little moisture can pass through it. Intello instead was invented by a company in Switzerland, and it's designed structures such that it doesn't let moisture in, but will let moisture out. So that's the second assembly. The third assembly, move the camera, is just underneath the window. So pull that down so you can see. So this assembly is just going to have, you can see the single stud that you've got here, and then you've got this 2-inch layer of insulation, and the sheetrock is going to go right over that. For insulation, we're just putting mineral bats in the wall cavity. So that's our third assembly.